So welcome. Thank you for coming. This is a talk on reversing and exploiting embedded devices, just in case that wasn't obvious. So let's just get going. Let's just get started with this. But actually, before I get started, I have one question. Who here has actually done exploitation on embedded devices, either MIPS or ARM? Awesome. Did you take that POC all the way to code exec? Awesome. Cool. So that's what we'll be talking about here too as well. So anyways, let's get started. So this is the outline for my talk. It's about an hour long or so, but I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly. I've done this talk before, but kind of like scaled it back on the technicalities. But since this is DEF CON, we're going to go full technical for a little bit. So this is the outline. I'm not going to go through it, but let's just say we're going to get a little technical. And after this, we're going to go on an adventure to actually take the stuff that's in this talk and find our own O-days and products in today. And that's what we're doing tomorrow. But who am I, right? Like, who's this kid up there wearing all black? So my name's Elvis, real name. I love how everyone's cell phones started going out taking pictures when I said that. I'm a senior security researcher at a local pen testing firm in Austin, Texas called Praetorian. I got into IoT research completely by accident, right? I started off in desktop space, and this whole IoT embedded device stuff got just completely by accident. The long story that short was that I had a coworker who found a vuln, a really nasty vuln. Took him 3 seconds to find it with a really dumb fuzzer. And I said, if you can do it, why can't I? And now I'm in this trap. So I'm also known as Black Owl on Twitter. That's cool. So let's get started. So like I said, I found some bugs because I got competitive with a former coworker of mine who found bugs really, really easily, high impact bugs that was affecting the entire SDK of the manufacturer. So I just did the same thing. I was fuzzing HTTP daemon, everything I think of, the method, the UART path, HTTP 1.0, 1.1, 0.9, host with long everything, maybe tons of new lines, no new lines, everything I could think of. The UPnP interface with SOAP, all the methods I can think of, anything that takes a string. Let's put command injection, let's put 3,000 A's. Nothing was happening. My device was all happy-dory going, no problem, man, we got this. So then I started taking it further. I was like, well, what about like directory traversal? Maybe pull some files. We do double percent encoding, mixed characters. So we can do like %25, 41 for like capital A, or let's just do all these crazy things, or command it. Just fuzz everything, but nothing was working. So what did work was I actually had to sit down. I took the firmware completely apart with binwalk, which is fantastic. And I found hidden APIs that you would never find on the front end by fuzzing. By disassembling this, that was inside the binary itself. You would not find it in the file system, it was inside the binary itself. And this particular one was, it would take the value from submit URL and pass it straight to system. Pretty dope. So, digging into firmware. So like I said, fuzzing stuff on the outside may just only get you on the surface. Some of the nasty stuff that you want to get into is going to be deep. You're going to have to dig for it. So extracting firmware binaries. Who here has heard of binwalk? Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Binwalk is an amazing tool. It's like very, very high level what binwalk is. It's a magic byte parser and extractor. That's all it does. If you look at the configuration files for binwalk, it is just using libmagic. Offset this. This is the byte like cafe bay for like Java, right? And it just goes through the entire structure. It's supposed to be matching the entire structure up before doing any kind of extraction. If there's any kind of false positives inside of that, and when you see the word invalid for this kind of stuff, it's supposed to be reducing false positives. So that's binwalk in a nutshell. Very, very simple, straightforward, but it's super powerful. But it can also be annoying if you're dealing with dumps that are not particularly organized properly, and binwalk just goes crazy and just says everything's an LZMA block. So great. So we can extract firmware that we can download off the internet that's not encoded or anything like that. Fun fact, a lot of encoding stuff is usually like single byte or multi-byte XOR, so don't worry there. So when I got into embedded devices, wow, that's a lot of people. What's up, guys? The one thing I didn't know was the assembly for it. I started off in x86, 64 land. I didn't know MIPS assembly. Like, what the hell's a branch? What the hell's all this stuff? But what I did know was C. And I was like, well, let me just do exactly what I did in x86. I'll just create C, compile it, maybe with some different flags, see what else comes out, and then just step through it. So this is exactly what I did. So right here, I have a local integer called redval, and it is initialized to 0. And in MIPS, we have a dedicated register called 0. It's just always null. So right here, I know that we have something called store word 0 to an offset 24 of S8. 24 S8. S8 is also known as a frame pointer, also known as EBP if you want to say. So we are now, we know we're in the local local variable for this function. Great. So I know S8, and I know the offset for that value. So we go further. What about calling functions? How do arguments get passed in this architecture? So the very first one, I pass hex 44, which in base 10 would be 68. And then second argument, which is A1, which is hex 65 or 101 in decimal, which is A1. Great. So now we know when we're calling a function, those A registers, A0, A1, A2, A3, are going to be pointers to the arguments that we're going to pass to this function. Great. This is super simple. So now we know like where initializing happens. I know where arguments get passed. What about return values, right? So I have this function called test, and I do a ret 66 or whatever it is, right? Well, remember that same offset 24 state that we saw from the beginning? That's ret val. So now we know V0, whenever a function returns, is going to contain the value of the return from the previous function. Cool. And then we do it again. Printf, second argument is going to be an A1 because the first argument is the format string, right? And then we just keep going, and then this is the final one where we finally return from main. And I put a D word in there, 43 for all capital C's, right? So we have an LUI of 2 bytes and then ORI of 2 bytes. And I was like, all right, that's kind of cool, but what is actually ORI doing? Because I don't feel like reading the assembly manual right now, and I just kind of want to see what's going on. So it's everything we've always done when we're trying to learn new assembly stuff. We just set the breakpoint. We make sure step mode is on. We step 1 to make sure that instruction was executed. We double check to make sure the execution happened. We check the value. So now we know when LUI 2 bytes happen, the greatest significant 2 bytes of that register will be that value. And then the lowest significant bytes, this is an ORI. So it's an OR integer, but the lowest significant, since it was null, 4343 gets populated and the whole D word gets populated into that register. Why did it have to do 2 instructions? Some people in there, if you don't know, I just want to say it. This is MIPS 32-bit, it's a MIPS 1, it's 4-byte instructions. So every single 4 bytes is going to be a different instruction, so that's why you can put 4 bytes for your operands to the opcode. Cool. So this is kind of like annoying. You can say it takes time, you gotta sit down, make some coffee, not get distracted by Mr. Robot or whatever you're watching. So what about making our lives easier? We want to find vulns, right? That's our jobs. It's what we want to do. We want to pop shells. That's all we want to do. So I learned about something called GPL, the General Public License, right? So when I was reading from it at a high level, I was like, if you license your binary and your source, everything on a GPL, you have to publish it. The source has to be out there. If it's on a GPL and you're like, no, I'm not going to give you the source, that's a violation. So what if I take, I don't know, vendor A into Google and type in source code? Cool. This is all the tarballs for that device. If you download this tarball, and if you modify a little bit with the symbolic links that are inside of it, because sometimes they break, you can compile your own binary for that device. It will upload and all that good stuff, which is what I did on this one. What about smart TVs? Complete source code is on there too. No need to take it apart and probe the flash chip on the SPI interface. Don't do that. Complete source code is in there. And you may find some old libraries. Maybe WebKit is old on there. I don't know. Then last vendor. Again, GPL. It's vendor name. All there. Very, very straightforward. And everything is documented beautifully. I love these guys. So it goes on and on, right? It goes on and on and on. And you'll run into 2 different types of like GPL codes with this type of devices. You'll have your Linux boxes and then your RTOS boxes. And they're completely different. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on, but yeah. So I talked a little bit about software, how to get into it, how I taught myself how to go over the hurdles of learning assembly so I can actually read this stuff and interpret what I'm reading. What about the hardware, right? It's like when I started getting into this, I exhausted the software stack completely at one point. I'm like, I'm completely stuck. I have to start opening this stuff up. So the thing is though, you have different levels of I don't know, you can say advancedness to your lab. You can build a super dream of your lab, super lab of your dreams, and you're dropping acid on chips, and you're doing all this crazy stuff. But you don't really need that. Majority of things that I do use this, maybe some of these, and that's about it. Hold on, let me go back. Sorry. And maybe some of those. Yeah, cool. So what I wanted to say is that the bare bones stuff, it says $95 to $100 or whatever, but that's the biggest chunks from the multimeter and the soldering iron itself, right? If you have friends or just have them laying around, that's your biggest chunk's going to go away. The JTAGulator, that's a controversial topic in my opinion, because If you go under the JTAG enum project for the Arduino Nanos, which is in my bag, which I have, you can build yourself a JTAGulator basically for about $5. So these things, right? Have you ever seen like an Arduino, these little $3 cheapy things from eBay, right? If you look at the JTAGulator source, you can see that there's a comment saying that the logic from it was actually pulled from the JTAG enum project for the Arduino Nano. Cool, so the same logic is in there too. What's the difference though? Like why is that so expensive and you can do this little thing? You can't do voltage control on this. I can't say, all right, and give me 1.8 logic for your software. It's not gonna work like that. It's just 3.3. So I would have to make my own like logic converter or like some sort of shield. So that's where the other thing comes into play. So that's where the JTAGulator becomes more like friendly and stuff like that. But I'll talk about that another time or offline. And then the logic analyzer is fantastic because I've seen so many boards where I go, what the hell does this test point do? Where does it go? I can't figure it out. Hook up the logic analyzer, do a quick sample, analyze what you see, and just go forward from there. So guessing, probing stuff with a multimeter has a very low sample rate. You're gonna go crazy, because I did. So finding UART. So UART in a nutshell, right? Most people in here know UART. It's basically, just think of it like telnet or SH. You got command line, or it's just a serial output from the device. So what about finding this kind of stuff without opening the device? What if I bought some $300 device and I go, I don't want to open it up, because what if I break it? Because I will, right? So every single wireless device, at least in the States, it has to go through something called FCC qualifications. Has to be tested. If it's wireless, does radio, has to be qualified. So you take this number called the FCC ID, you go on FCC's website, click a little button called internal photos, which is great, and you get the complete PCB, front and back, up and down, left, right, Konami code. Awesome. And right there, like this is, like not all the time, but this is a very good hunch. When you see a rows of pins like that, like those 5 pins I highlight right there, it looks like something that may be useful for development or testing. I don't know, it kind of looks like a shell interface, and the one below that may be some sort of JTAG interface to test like the processor or anything that's in the JTAG chain. But that's my first suspicion. So I go, that's UART maybe, so let me go probe and test it out. And spoiler alert, it was. Cool. So that was some easy ways. But one thing I really want to stress, don't make the same mistakes I did. Find your ground first. I've had too many smoke shows or too many moments when I'm just like, yeah, that should be fine. Shit. So find your ground first. The one thing that I like to do is like, I find common grounds. Like this is like a shield. There was a shielding over it. I took it off. I found it to be a common ground. But like USB casings on the outside, they're usually grounded. Just find yourself a common ground point. If you flip on the back, you'll see also casing groundings for like any kind of ports. Find a ground, and then don't use continuity mode. I used to say that, and I was dead wrong. And this is why. When you use continuity mode, you know the one where you say, all right, is A connected to B, and it makes a noise, right? That's pumping voltage through it. And I hooked up my logic analyzer, and this was me moving the dial, so we got some noise. And the multimeter in continuity mode pumps out 1.6 volts, continuous. So if we have any kind of fuses or very, very sensitive, or anything else that may blow that's over 1.6, I don't really see anything that says I can't handle anything over 1.6, but we just want to be careful. So instead, we use resistance mode. Resistance doesn't do voltage, doesn't pump out 1.6 volts like we saw before. So all we need to do is to say if A connects to B, we look at resistance. If it's absolute 0, they're connected. Awesome, or have no resistance in the middle. So yes, they're connected, great. So that's how I find ground now, is by using resistance, because I was using the wrong way and learned that I could blow stuff up. But you are in a nutshell, right? We got transmit to receive in a common ground. There's no clock. It's going to be like some sort of like, I think it's like asynchronous or something like that, where you have to like tell it. So basically, think of it like a phone call. You talk to somebody and you hear it, the end. But now you have to figure out how fast it's talking. So there's methods of finding the baud rate for these UART devices, and it's annoying. I don't like brute forcing UART interfaces. Is it 9600? No. Detached. 33400 or something like that? No. So instead, we take a 20-second digital capture, and if anyone's used a logic analyzer, you'll know that digital captures are very, very, very tiny. If this was an analog capture, it'd probably be in the gigs, but this is like a 20K file, right? So this is ambiguous. So let's just use our CSI cyber skills and we enhance this photo really well. And what I'm looking for here is something called the shortest width bit. Doesn't have to be the exact one, but I'm looking for when the falling edge and the rising edge happen again. What's the distance between that? So in this one it's 8.8 microseconds. So, okay, cool. You found that. What can we do with that? So if we take that 8.8 and we take 1 second over 8.8 divided by a million, whatever the measurement for that is, we get 1136363636. We're going to round it to our standards, which is 115200. But just for fun, I'm like, you know, the logic, the Soleil logic analyzer comes with a different kind of analyzers that come in with it. This is called the serial one. So I said, this is the baud rate. I want you to analyze this signal and see if anything comes out. And it comes back saying, this particular segment is the word start, and there's a space. Cool. So now I know the transmit pin on the device, I know the ground, and I know the baud rate. The receive, don't hate me, but I brute force my way around until something clicks. Click here, enter, enter, enter. Nope, next one. All right. Talked about UART, so how about JTAG? So what the hell is JTAG? What is it for? I've heard JTAG, I've heard people use JTAG, blah, blah. What can you do with it? It's literally a testing, like, it's a, what is it, like a testing suite. It's supposed to be made for quick, easy ways to diagnose hardware problems without sitting down and probing everything. So this is great, but it has a lot of functionality. So what we have here is something called a tap interface. The tap interface connects to the insides of the actual logic of the chip. It's a little bit complex. I'm not 100% there, so I'm not going to try to BS my way around, but I do understand this, which is the state machine of JTAG. So basically, when we have lines, the lines here are going to represent our mode select, TMS, and then the TCK, the clock, is going to indicate when we go from next step to next step to next step, right? So let's say that I'm at run, test, idle. If TMS is high and the clock happens one more time, the TMS will move over there. So now I'm at select DR scan or data register. So this is how the state machine works. And if I keep TMS high, it will go all the way up to test logic reset. And correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I've seen, there's no TDI needed for this, and you'll get the ID code. TDI stuff, when you start doing bypass scans and you're filling every register up with, I believe, ones to put into a bypass state, that's a different thing. But we'll go into that later. Sorry. So locating the flash chip. So what if you find UART and it's password protected? And you can't brute force it because brute forcing the root password takes like 3 seconds for every attempt. That's slow, right? So what if you also can't download the firmware when it's not public? It's some sort of like proprietary device, right? So now this is where we start getting nitty gritty. So let's start comparing to computers. This would be the hard drive. So we just find out who makes this particular chip. We use Google because, you know, I'm pretty smart like that. And then we pull up our chip. And the main things I'm looking for is basically where are the interfaces I can talk to, the input and output, and what commands can I send it in order to extract data. And also, how can I put it in a write protect state so I don't erase something? Kind of like a floppy disk when you have that thing, right? So the thing is though with this is that with chips, with these flash chips, they are like a slave. When a master chip says, I want to talk to your mind, I select you. That is it. You cannot have another probe into it and talk to your chip. It's one-to-one. So when you're actually pulling the chip off, or you're actually trying to dump everything. So there's two ways, right? Some people like to be non-obstructive and want to keep the chip on the board. And that's a perfectly good way of doing it. And this is how you can do it. There's a thing called like it's an SOIC, then the number. Like this one's 8, there's 16. There's also like breakout boards that you can buy and put the chip in here and have a huge breakout you can put into a breadboard and do whatever you want. But there's also this way. But the problem with this one is that you have to provide power to the chip because it's not going to turn on like magic, right? But you may turn on other devices around it, and you may put the chip into a select mode. So that's not good. So what can we do without removing the chip? Find the reset pin on the processor, either ground it or put it high, whatever datasheet says. Then turn on the device fully. The device will not do anything at all, and you should be able to communicate with JTAG and everything else. Because if there's been devices as well where you see JTAG for 1 second, then initialize, everything goes away. It's because the driver is doing it. So if you put into a reset state, everything should communicate perfectly fine. So that's how you can do it without removing it. But I remove everything just because I like to do that. So that was a flash chip that's serial. I've been playing around with these things, and I'm pretty sure these things were made by the devil. These These are known as NAND flash chips, and they do everything in parallel. And I have a dump here, and it's offline. It's on my slides, and I'll show you the hardships I've been having with this, with all the blocks and organizing everything. And that arrow is not pointing anything. But this is basically how I hooked it up. This is a FT2232H, and there's all these white papers. There's a black hat talk on it. You can look it up. It's super, super simple. And this is how it works. You hook it up, you turn it on, and then there's a tool out there called dump flash, and you say, give me the ID code, and it gives you everything, gives you the page count, and extracting this 2 gig thing took 12 hours, super fast. So this is the thing as well, what I was talking about bin walk earlier. This thing, the blocks are all over the place, so I'm trying to figure out how the microcontroller wrote to the NAND flash. I can reorganize everything. Running bin walk against it goes that for about 5 minutes. LZMA, yeah, no. So that's the only thing about NAND flash. With SPI flash, running bin walk on it, done. It's serial. But once you start having parallel flash memory, it starts getting really complicated because it's not all nice and laid out. So exploitation. So all this software, hardware stuff, all right, cool, we've heard it a million times. Let's actually break some stuff, right? That's what we're here for. So one thing I've noticed a lot, so a lot of red teamers will probably know this as well. Developers love to keep debug code in production stuff. Why? Yeah, there's no TV, there's no monitor hooked up, so who cares, right? So when I first found a vuln and I made the crash, this came out at a UART, and it said your return address is 434333, and your program counter is that too. Cool, so now I know my offsets off the bat. So just to verify I did it again, so look for debug code for signal catchers. It's probably in there. So you don't have to like cross-compile GDB and attach and all that good stuff. So analyze the crash. So it's the same thing over and over again, just like x86. Analyze the crash, find your offsets, and you put everything into place and everything will work. So analyzing function returns. This is how I taught myself all this stuff, like I said before. So we have the same program, 2 architectures. We have x86. All this is doing is just calling stir copy, taking argument value 1, and just throwing it into like a stack buffer of like, I don't know, it's really, really small. and then it prints out some stuff and then it returns, right? But then we have leave and ret. So leave, so EBP and ESP-SHIB switch, I believe. And then we have ret. So then we have whatever ESP is pointing to, it's going to pop those 4 bytes into EIP and move over +4. Cool. So MIPS, same thing. Load word RA from some offset from the stack. RA is return address. In MIPS, we have a dedicated register for return addresses. Load word frame pointer from this thing. Same thing, it's like leave. So we have the same thing. Restore the frame pointer, restore the stack, and then jump RA or ret. So instead of having the instructions in one thing, it's broken out. Load it and then jump. Cool. So x86 and now ARM. So ARM is a very special architecture. That's all I'm going to say. So going from MIPS to ARM is a little bit different. But basically, the same things are going to be the same. The same thing, function return and entry and yada, yada, yada. We just return everything it was when we called it, right? So the one thing also with ARM is that you have different modes, and some MIPS architectures also have this, where you have something called a thumb mode and an ARM mode. Very, very easy nutshell. So thumb mode is a 16-bit interpreter. So we have 2-byte interpretations for instructions. The way that happens, you have something called, I think it's jump and link exchange, or branch and link exchange, sorry. And if the address that is going to, if the least significant bit is set, -1, go back to that memory, yeah, -1 of that memory, and then put everything into 16-bit mode. That's how it works. So if we jump into a odd memory and it's jump and exchange, 16-bit. If not, then it's ARM mode. Cool. So like I said before, if we just analyze everything, we kind of know where everything's going into play. We can predict things now. So I know this is a little boring. I apologize, guys. So just like before, we're just crashing, analyzing, crashing. All right, now we're starting to see everything come into play. Everything's starting to really look the same as x86, just different instructions. That's all it is. Instruction hunting in libc, though, is a different story, especially in MIPS. x86, you guys are spoiled. Spoiled with instructions. Stack buffer overflow, no NX, jump ESP, right? Basically. I'm not going to say that's every single situation, but basically, right? Win. Simple. No NX, that's all we care about. MIPS. Jump register stack. Nope. Move stack into T9. Maybe we can call T9. Nope. Let's go screw yourself. So this one is more complicated. We have to ROP in order to do a basic stack execution. We don't care about NX. We're not calling any kind of APIs to modify memory attributes. So this one was a little bit more interesting. So what I had to do was I had to chain gadgets together. And I completely skipped that by accident. So sorry about that. So basically what I had to do from the very beginning, I only had a limited set of registers. So first gadget, get more registers. Then I sleep, because when I was doing this at the time, I was hearing about instruction cache flushing. Not every single MIPS device has that. This is an R3000 MIPS 1. It doesn't use instruction caching at all. There was no reason to go into sleep. But I did it anyways. And then from there, it's to adjust, put the stack, add 18 offset into it, and put into A1. Move A1 into T9, jump T9. That is how I did jump ESP on MIPS. So one thing that was a little annoying, and just like we all have with x86 that we've done before, there are null bytes. So when I first came into this, it seemed like every single instruction had null bytes, and I said, you know what, forget this router stuff. I'm going back to desktop space. GG, I'm done. You guys can have fun with this. But then I relaxed. I said, all right, let's actually relax. What about XOR? What if I just, I don't know, XOR this and that? Dope. So we don't have null bytes. So we can just make an XOR encoder. So in a nutshell, though, the whole thing is still the same ideas and techniques that we've used with x86. It's just a different instruction set. That is it. So before I go into this a little bit more, the shellcode stuff that I've done before, and a little bit the I don't know, like the prelude or whatever to the shellcode. I did everything in RASM. I used RASM 2 to assemble all my instructions into opcodes, because I didn't feel like using an assembler and trying to get everything working correctly. No, screw it. I just want these instructions, and I'm just going to copy these opcodes into my payload, and that's going to be done with it. So this one, all I did there was I XORed S0 with S0, stored in S0. Why? In MIPS, 4 nulls is no op. And when I was jumping back to the stack, I had an address that was not resolving to an actual instruction. So I just overrode it with nulls. It's a NOP sled. I know it's dirty, but it worked. So in a nutshell, grab your libc address, find your instruction offsets, craft your shellcode, test your exploit in QEMU or Q, whatever you want to call it. I'm really bad with butchering these names. I test everything in an emulation first. And then from there, all I had to do was replace the libc base address. Because a lot of these devices don't use ASLR, even though randomized VA space is set to 2. Doesn't work. Crash the device, restart it many, many times. libc and everything else, all the other libraries that it loads are going to be in the same place every time. So this example is from something I've made. It's called the DVRF project, or damn vulnerable router. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but so this one, it's the very first level. It's just a stack buffer overflow, and I wanted to show that this is in QEMU, and I took the same exact payload. The pattern is different, but still the same payload. Copied it to my device, and it works beautifully. Great. So going forward, though, I'm talking about all this exploitation stuff, and I was guilty of doing this. I was super guilty of doing this. I would find a vuln, and I would say, yes, PC is 41, 41, 41. I am done. Drop mic. But that doesn't do anything. I was limiting myself, and I was limiting my growth. So we need to get away from this. We need no more DOS POCs. And I vote that we make POCs great again. But don't worry, I'm not going to build a Faraday wall around these devices and make the vendors pay for it. I guarantee you that. So this is my demo now. So yeah, so let's get started. But before I do this, I like to kind of like get into character, kind of have fun with this. You know, we stay here all day, we see talks, we need to have some fun, right? So, have you guys ever seen stock photos of hackers? Hello. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to set up the environment first. So the application I'll be exploiting in this demo is called socket BOF. The application, all it does, it's listening on a socket, and whatever data it gets, it just start copies it. These levels and stuff I'll talk about towards the end are supposed to be educational levels to help you learn about this kind of stuff. But let's just set this up. Hold on. Hold on. Huh. Yeah, hold on. There we go. Yep. All right, sorry about that. All right, before we get started, can we kill the lights? No. All right, awesome. So what I'm going to do here, I forgot my own arguments for my own script, so that's why I had to print out the help. So we're going to set this whole thing up. And I'm going to get my microphone because my computer's going to do the rest of the talking. Sorry, I'm a little slow. Huh? Thank you. Let me make sure that's actually all right, cool. Just want to make sure, I don't want the demo guys to get mad at me. So we did this on 8080, right? So now, over here, let's make a new tab, nc-l-v-p 8080. So now we have a netcat listener waiting. And I'm now going to make sure that's right. 8080. All right, cool. So without further ado, let's get this going. Oh no, hold on. The sound's not working. No, I don't. Oh man. No. Oh, it works.
Front, left.
All right, cool.
Hello IoT Village. Before we begin, I want to say that this will be my last performance of this demo. With that out of the way, let's corrupt this application's stack. But first, we need some sick hacking music. That's better. Now we need to cover our tracks for that offset. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Ugh. So we can also verify, so this application is still in this stuck state. So if I go back to netcat and just kill it to just verify, then it's, it returns. So that was an actual exploit. So thank you for bearing with that. Like I said, I just want to have fun. You can bring back the lights. So like I said, I just want to have fun with that. But like I said, I went from not knowing MIPS exploitation, MIPS assembly to doing that. So it just takes some time. You guys can do it too. It's pretty straightforward. The differences that I learned. x86 base stack buffer overflow is pretty simple, straightforward, like I said 1,000 times. ROPing, just know where ESP is and where the ret's going to happen, and everything just falls into place. MIPS base stack buffer overflow is a little bit less straightforward because of the less instructions that you have than x86. But it's a little bit more fun, but it does require ROPing. So if you've never ROPed before in x86, you should probably do that first before coming over here. And then ROPing in MIPS, same thing. You're just calling different APIs and feeding it different arguments. Same thing as x86. ARMv5, I haven't finished this one yet because I'm still learning the many different instructions that ARM provides. So this one, so far I've seen is that the gadgets can be found in different modes. The same function can represent two different types of instruction sets all in once. You can analyze a function in ARM mode and have different instructions than we have in thumb mode, right? Kind of as expected versus 32 versus 16-bit instruction sets. So, and then at the very end, you also have something called POP-PC, which can be used for your ROP. So you just POP-PC, 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 or RET, right? So interfacing with JTAG, or interacting with JTAG. So this is an Arduino Zero that I bought. I used it more because I had a Cortex processor and I wanted to play more with more real-time devices. So this is the JTAGulator, like I said in the beginning, where you can use the Arduino, blah blah blah. But I just wanted to learn actually like how does this work. So on this device, JTAG is listed out. But I was like, let's brute force this and see what happens. So that's what this is JTAGulator. You just hook up as many pins you want. Before I even do that, who here has heard of JTAGulator? I am not going further with what I was going to say about JTAGulator. Very, very straightforward, right? So next step though. All right, so I find TDI, I find data in, find data out, I find mode select, I find everything I need, I find the clock. Now what? Now you have to actually interact with that interface, right? You have to actually talk to it. The state machine will still be the same, but the instruction registers and data registers, think of it as operand and opcode. Same thing, right? You have an opcode and then operand to go with it. Same thing, but it's in JTAG and they're very small registers. So there's an open source project that I use called OpenOCD. And in this one, it's funny because one of the devices that's in the other room, I actually used OpenOCD to talk to JTAG, so it's actually pretty cool to see that in here. But once you have JTAG open and it actually can talk to it, you can't just say OpenOCD, my FTDI chip that's connected to JTAG. No, it has to actually know the profile. So if you go online, these things have many, many, many profiles already for a lot of chips. And different manufacturers, like ARM, right? ARM is not a chip maker, right? It just does its instruction sets and all that shit. So, but different manufacturers will implement the same JTAG state machine and all the instructions and everything else the same. So different type of manufacturers will use the same OpenOCD configuration. Also, newer versions of the chip may also work on older versions for that JTAG as well, and vice versa. So don't get stuck when you can't find the configuration file for your exact processor. Find something around it or with the same architecture, and it may be the same. So when you open it up though, this is just for people who have never used it before. You have GDB server that opens up locally, and you can start dumping memory. You can do whatever you want. It's GDB, right? So what's great about this was on a Cortex processor, and Cortex has a very specific memory layout. And with this one, there's a specific memory address. If you look at the data sheet, you could dump AES keys and all that good stuff. So this is very powerful when we want to kind of extract information from it that we can't get to it normally, like maybe SPI, the flash chip is encrypted, or all this other crap. So this is our last resort. I always like to say that start with the software stack first, exhaust all your resources, then go to hardware, and start from easy to hard. It's the same thing that we always do in our everyday lives. So once we have the JTAG connected and it's connected to it, we can say how fast is the clock going. I want to measure this. I want to reset the entire processor and then halt. I want to set a breakpoint when, say at this not memory address, when memory address is being written to here, or like when the kernel is being loaded, we can do whatever we want. So like for example, if there's UART password, you can use this at a watch point when the kernel arguments are being loaded. Set it to single user mode, let it load, done. So wrapping up, so I want to say thank you guys a lot for sitting through this. I know I've been a little repetitive or a little fast, but thank you guys. This is wrapping up now. So this is my project. This is the demo that I gave you guys. This is called my damn vulnerable router firmware. Where did this come from? This is the literal story. I was in my shower thinking about damn vulnerable web app, damn vulnerable Linux. And I was like, that's so silly. They have so many of those. There's not one for routers. So I'm going to make one. So that's what happened. But how did I do this? Remember that tarball thing I told you from a while ago? This device was sitting in my closet, not doing anything. It's a $10 device now. It's an A0211N. And I just picked up my thing. I was like, oh, let's start writing firmware for this. Let's actually do it. So that's what I did. I downloaded tarball and just started ripping everything out. I started learning how they did everything and just made my own custom tarball for it. And that's on GitHub. You can download it, you can fork it, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. But this is how this works. So I'm working on another device. The device is actually they actually have it in there as well. It's a TrendNet. It's an ARM device as well. I'm just having issues compiling the kernel. It keeps bombing out for some reason, saying that processor.h is not found. So once I figure that out and kind of fix that, then I'll have another DVRF build for ARM. And what's good about this is that there's two ways to do this. You can put the firmware on your device. And you can always revert back to. There's not a one-way street. And when you do that, the ponables that I have on there are only accessible through UART. You have to start them through UART. So this forces you to open up the device, plug through UART, find the directory, find the executable, run it, right? Or you can emulate it. I prefer both ways. Just do everything that you can. As long as you get to point B, who cares, right? But this idea was to learn, to help people dig into this, get the hands-on experience with exploiting stuff outside the x86 space, and also help IoT developers. I say IoT like this, just it's a keyword that's very stuck in my brain. So help people learn this stuff as well, because I've seen 90s programming code in today's architecture. When I was doing example codes of start copy and just, funny stuff, that's actually happening today. I will be demoing an exploit tomorrow that's an actual one that I found that does this kind of stuff, and I'll be chaining 4 vulns together in order to get complete compromise. But that'll be for tomorrow. It's in the IoT Village, shameless plug. So this is where you can download the damn vulnerable router firmware stuff on GitHub. That's the link. It's on Praetorian's GitHub. I am updating it. If you want to update it as well, more people, the better. This is for the community. I just wanted to see if I can teach what I've learned. That's all I want to do with all this stuff. If I can learn it, you can learn as well. I'm not some amazing guy. I'm just some little kid from Texas. My future plans is to keep working on this stuff, do the ARM one, get that finished. I have a blog post that I've done on introductory to software exploitation, and then getting started with this project as well. And that code for this exploit that I demoed is on the blog as well, fully documented as well. You can copy and paste it and do whatever the hell you want. The shellcode is in there as well from Bowcaster. And yeah, take a look at it, do whatever you want. I'm also available on Twitter. And I'm always available to help you guys out. There's no such thing as a dumb answer or a dumb question. There may be a dumb answer from me. No such thing as a dumb question. If you are confused, lost, need some help, or going, hey man, I've been probing this thing for hours, can't find anything, can you help me out? I'm always here to help you guys. That's what I want to do, is teach and help people grow. That's what we're all doing here, is to grow, right? That's why we go to conferences. So before we wrap up, I'll be holding a workshop tomorrow at the IoT Village at 10 a.m. Basically, it's a bring your own device type thing, or maybe take one or borrow one from IoT Village, or just share one from a researcher. We're doing a 0-day hunting workshop, but we're not just finding vulns. We're going to take it all the way to code exec too. So attendees will be encouraged to craft exploits for the vulns that they find. All the vulns that are found just because of disclosure policies, stuff like that, will be safely disclosed over PGP or whatever communication the vendor prefers to the vendor first, and then we'll do the exploitation, get that underway, and then you can go claim your prizes or whatever. But I just want to help people actually find this stuff and get the hands-on experience. We sit here and watch and watch and watch and watch. Let's actually do stuff and actually commit it, right? So that's tomorrow, 10 a.m., IoT Village. I can put this out online if anyone wants it. You guys take pictures too. The multimeter that I use and the USB microscope, literally Amazon, came in, tried it out, worked great. Nothing more crazier than that. But the one thing I use a lot is the FT232H by Adafruit. It's $15. The equivalent is the Shikra, which is $50. Has a little bit more to it, but it's the same chip. So depending on your budget, you may want to go through that route. But that's the end of my talk. I appreciate you guys sitting through this. Are there any questions before we say, get out? Yes?
So for chips that or MCUs that have block bits, or if they have JTAG disabled, I was wondering if you could do a graphical solution or
So the question was around what was it, the manipulation of chips if JTAG's disabled and stuff like that. So there's one question around that too. How is JTAG disabled? Is it software disabled, or is it a fuse? If it's a hardware disabled, you're kind of screwed unless you can decap it and fuse that fuse back together to bridge it. If it's software, find the reset pin, ground it, or do what the datasheet says, but it's usually ground it, power it on, everything will turn on, and no software will be loaded, and the JTAG state machine will be accessible. So, but if it's the latter, you're kind of screwed. So that's the only downfall, right? Yes?
What if GDB is not enabled on the device?
If GDB what?
It's not enabled.
So I've cross-compiled GDB, and I can teach you guys how to do this well. So on my device as well, I had, there's no GDB on it, and I had to craft my exploit. So that's why I was doing the emulation route. But I did cross-compile GDB for MIPS. And I believe it was MIPS Big Indian, Little Indian for generic instruction of MIPS 1. So that's on there. You can compile it yourself. It's a little bit pain in the ass, but it's doable. So you would have to cross-compile it yourself, put it on the device, or if the device doesn't have enough space on it, you're going to have to go through the emulation route. So that's the only two ways. Cross-compile it yourself, put it onto the device, because most devices usually have wget. They usually have wget, or you can just echo it through the serial interface and just put it into a file, right? So put GDB on it, run it, or just emulate it yourself through QEMO or whatever you want to use. So that's, if what? If you have access to GDB?
If you don't have access to the device, how can you put GDB
Oh, you can put GDB server on it. GDB server, and then just attach it to the process, have it listed on the socket, connect over its socket over the network, and that's it. That's the way I've done it. Like, I've always either GDB, and then I put GDB and I use it over a serial interface, or GDB server, connect over a socket, and just do everything like that. Or just emulate it. That's pretty much it. Nothing too crazy there. Are there any more questions? Yes?
What hardware did you use to talk to the flash chips?
Yes, so the question was, what is the hardware that I use to talk to the flash chips and stuff? That is the Adafruit FT232H breakout board. It is a FTDI chip, and it supports JTAG, SPI, I2C, UART, and I believe that's about it. But there may be more, but that's what I used. And in the OpenOCD, you just tell it the driver to use is FTDI, and it will automatically attach to it. So yeah, it's $15, man. So that's the one I use. Any more questions? Yes.
Have you been working with Cortex M3 and M4? So basically the RTOS kind of stuff. And what is your take on like trusted platform modules? I mean, FLTI.
So this one is kind of a heavy question. So he was talking about the Cortex M3, M4s, you know, the real-time devices and the trusted models, right? Yes, trusted platform. I haven't looked into that, so I don't know at this time. So I would have to follow up later. So right now, I just don't know. I don't want to give you a bad answer. So yeah, let's sync up afterwards because I want to find you that answer because I'm curious now as well. Any more questions? Nope. Yeah, sure. So if you guys want to, you know, see what's going on in my not so interesting life, hold on 1 second. Yeah, so my Twitter it's Black Owl, but someone already had that name, so I said no. So I replaced the L with the 1 and the O with the 0. That's about it. Nothing too crazy. The images I was fuzzing libpng with an owl image, and it looked pretty cool, so I took a screenshot. So yeah, that's about it. Any more questions before I just wrap up? No? Great. Again, thank you guys. Have a great conference.